He called her unwanted at their own engagement dinner, in front of everyone, with a smile on his face like it cost him nothing. Now Lady Dlamini sat at that table with 50 people around her, champagne glasses clinking, and heard the man she was about to marry lean toward his best friend and say, "I'm only doing this because I owe a dead man. She wasn't my choice. She was just available." She heard every word. She was supposed to. He didn't lower his voice, not even a little. The woman next to Naledi pretended to check her phone. The man across the table suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. And Naledi sat there in her burgundy dress that her aunt had helped her pick out 3 weeks ago. The dress she'd cried happy tears in at the fitting, and felt something inside her chest go very, very quiet. Not broken, not angry, just quiet, like a room after a door slams shut. Toad Young-O didn't look at her once after he said it. He just leaned back in his chair, poured himself more wine, and laughed at something his colleague said on the other side of the table. Charming, relaxed, like he hadn't just reduced a human being to a line item in a debt ledger. Naledi excused herself, calmly, said she needed the bathroom, walked down the hallway of that restaurant, past the coat check, past the hostess, past the couple arguing quietly near the fire exit, and then she sat down on the floor of the single-occupancy bathroom, pressed her back against the cold tile wall, and looked at the small, compact mirror she'd brought to touch up her lipstick. She looked at her own face for a long time, round cheeks, full lips, a dark skin that her grandmother always called the color of good soil, and eyes that, right now, were asking a question she didn't want to answer. "What are you doing here?" She opened her bag, and that's when her fingers found the small pill bottle she always carried for her anxiety, and something shifted in her mind, something dark and tired that said, "Maybe this is just too much. Maybe I'm just too much. Maybe being available isn't even enough." She shook 3 pills into her palm, then 4. Then her hand was trembling, and she couldn't tell if she was counting anymore or just... The door opened. She hadn't locked it. Dato Hyo Young. Oh stood in the doorway in his charcoal suit, one hand on the frame, and his face did something she had never seen it do before. It went completely still. Not cold, not cruel. Still, looked like a man who has just seen something that will live inside him for the rest of his life, whether he wants it to or not. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him without a word. "Give me those," he said. Quietly. No drama. No performance. She looked up at him. "You don't want me here." "I know." He crouched down to her level, which no man in a suit should be able to do gracefully, but he managed it. "Give me the pills, Naledi." "You said I was available, like I was a parking space." "I know what I said." "Did you know I could hear you?" A pause. 1 second. 2. "No." "Would it have changed anything?" He didn't answer that, but he reached out very slowly and took the pills from her hand, one by one. Not forcefully, just steadily, like a man who had decided in this moment that this one thing was not going to happen. And Naledi let him take them. Not because he deserved to, but because some part of her, the stubborn, persistent, deeply inconvenient part, still wanted to see how this story ended. She didn't know yet that it would end with him on his knees. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you're already feeling something heavy in your chest, good. That means you're paying attention. This story is for people who understand what it feels like to be in a room full of people and still feel invisible. If that's you, stay with us. Subscribe, because this channel is where we tell the whole truth about love, the ugly beginning and the hard-won end. And drop a comment right now. Tell us, would you have stayed in that bathroom? Would you have walked out of that restaurant? what would you have done? But now let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand why Tae-young-oh was standing in a restaurant bathroom holding a woman's anxiety pills, you have to understand two things. You have to understand what kind of man Park Soo-hyun was, and you have to understand what kind of world Naledi Dlamini grew up in. Park Soo-hyun was the kind of man who made everyone in a room feel like the most important person there. Not because he was performing it, but because he genuinely meant it every single time. He was Korean, raised in Johannesburg after his family relocated when he was 9, and he moved through the world with a particular kind of ease that came from having learned 2 cultures fluently and somehow become the best of both. He was also Tae-young's closest friend, had been since they were 22 and running together in circles that polite people didn't discuss at dinner parties. Soo-hyun had pulled Tae-young out of situations that should have ended his life twice. Not metaphorically, literally. A man with a gun in Durban. A deal gone wrong in Busan. Soo-hyun had put his own body between Tae-young and consequences more times than either of them ever counted. And in their world, that kind of debt didn't get repaid with money or favors. It got repaid with your word. 3 months before the engagement dinner, Soo-hyun was diagnosed with a stage 4 aggressive cancer that his doctors described with the kind of careful language that meant, essentially, very little time. He called Tae-young to his hospital room on a Tuesday afternoon, and Tae-young sat there in a plastic chair and held the hand of the most unbreakable person he knew, and listened. "Naledi," Soo-hyun said. "My cousin. You know her." Tae-young knew of her, had seen her at a couple of gatherings over the years. Quiet girl, round face, always seemed to be on the edge of rooms rather than the center of them. "I know who she is. Her family," Soo-hyun said, and his voice got tired in a way that had nothing to do with illness. "They've never made her feel like she belongs anywhere. She's been the last option her whole life. Last to be chosen at school. Last in her family's plans. The one nobody fights for." Tae-young didn't say anything. "I need someone to fight for her," Soo-hyun said. "Not just protect her. Fight for her. Make her feel like she was chosen first." "Soo-hyun, I'm not asking you to love her on day 1. His friend's eyes were steady, even if his hands were not. "I'm asking you to give her a real life, a real name, a real place in the world. You have the resources to do that. You have the power to do that." He paused. "You owe me, Tae." There it was. Tae-young had never said no to that phrase in his life, had never had a reason to that felt big enough. He said yes. He went home. He sat in his penthouse apartment and looked at the city lights for a long time. Then he called his lawyer, called his financial advisor, and began arranging the most loveless engagement in the history of human relationships. Naledi, for her part, had heard about the arrangement from her aunt Zodwa, the one aunt who had always been slightly more honest than kind. Soo-hyun arranged it before he passed, Aunt Zodwa told her, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of rooibos tea and absolutely no softening of her voice. Tae-young-oh has agreed. He's a serious man with serious money and serious connections. You should say yes. "Does he know what I look like?" Naledi asked. Her aunt paused, which was its own kind of answer. "Auntie, he knows who you are, Naledi." "That's not what I asked." Zodwa sipped her tea. "You're 28 years old. You have your degree. You're a good person. Not every story starts with fireworks." Naledi looked around the small living room she'd grown up in, the peeling corner near the window, the furniture that had been old when she was a child, the photograph of Soo-hyun on the side table, taken at his university graduation, grinning like someone who expected the world to be kind to him and mostly found that he was right. She thought about what Soo-hyun had told her once at a family barbecue when she was 25 and feeling particularly invisible. She'd been standing near the drinks table watching her prettier cousins absorb all the sunlight in the yard, and Soo-hyun had materialized next to her with a plate of meat and said, very casually, "You know you're the most interesting person here, right?" She'd laughed. "You're the only one who thinks so." "I'm the only one who bothered to check," he'd said. She missed him every single day. She said yes to the arrangement. And so here they were, post-bathroom, post-pill scare, post-whispered cruelty, and post-quiet rescue. Two people bound to each other by a dead man's wish and about 7 layers of mutual resentment. Tae-young drove her home that night in silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind that has a whole conversation inside it that neither person wants to start. When he pulled up outside her aunt's house, he sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. "I shouldn't have said what I said," he offered finally. "No. I didn't think about the volume. I know. That's actually the part that hurt more than the words." He looked at her then. Really looked. Like he was trying to find a file in his memory labeled, "How to handle this," and coming up completely empty. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Naledi, I'm being honest with you. I have never in my life been in a situation I didn't have a map for. He gestured vaguely at the space between them. "I don't have a map." "Neither do I," she said. "But I at least came here willing to try." She got out of the car. He watched her walk to the front door. And for the first time since Soo-hyun's funeral, Tae-young felt something that wasn't grief or obligation. He wasn't sure what it was yet. He drove home faster than he should have. 2 days later, he came to her aunt's house in the morning, not with flowers, not with a dramatic speech, with a folder. Naledi opened the door in her pajamas, which were printed with small cartoon cacti, and stared at him. He was dressed like he was going to a board meeting. She was wearing a top that said, "Not a morning person" on it in block letters. "It's 7:45, she said. "I know." He held up the folder. "What, contract?" "You came to give me a contract at 7:45 in the morning. I thought it would be better to have everything clearly stated. No misunderstandings." He paused. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked into the living room, sat down at the small table, opened the folder, and spread the pages out with the practiced efficiency of a man who communicated best through paperwork. Naledi sat across from him. She read in silence. It was thorough. She'd give him that. No romantic obligations. No shared bedroom arrangements unless mutually agreed. She would have full access to a household account, a car, medical coverage, and, she paused here, a funded postgraduate program if she chose to pursue one. "Education?" she said. San Soo-hyun said you wanted to study further, but couldn't afford to. She looked at the page for a long moment. "Duration?" she asked. "We can revisit after a year." "And what's expected of me?" "Public appearances when required, present as a couple at necessary events. Nothing else." "Nothing else," she repeated. "Nothing you're uncomfortable with." She looked up from the pages. He was watching her with that careful, unreadable expression of his, the one that probably served him very well in boardrooms and negotiations, but was extremely aggravating in a kitchen. "Tae-young," she said. "Yes. Do you actually want to do this?" A pause. 3 full seconds. "I want to honor what I promised." "That's not the same thing." "I know." She looked at the contract again. Then she picked up the pen he'd helpfully placed on the table. And she signed it. Not because she'd run out of options. Not because she was desperate. But because Soo-hyun had loved her enough to use his dying breath on this. And that meant something. Even if the man across from her didn't yet know how to act like it did. She pushed the papers back across the table. "I want it on record that I did this with my eyes open." "Noted," he said. And then, almost imperceptibly, something at the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. The move-in happened the following Saturday, Naledi arrived with 4 boxes and a rolling suitcase, and a small succulent named Gerald. Ta-Young's apartment occupied an entire floor of a building in the wealthiest part of the city. All clean lines, cool tones, and the kind of quiet that expensive real estate buys. The housekeeper, Mrs. Park, saw an older Korean woman with a calm face and sharp eyes, showed Naledi to the guest suite. It was twice the size of her bedroom at her aunt's house. "Is this okay?" Mrs. Park asked. "It's perfect," Naledi said. She placed Gerald on the windowsill. He looked very small against the city view, but then again, so did she. And she'd decided years ago that small wasn't the same as insignificant. Tae-Young was on a call when she arrived, and was still on one when she finished unpacking. He acknowledged her presence in the apartment with a brief nod and a gesture toward the kitchen that she interpreted to mean, "Help yourself." She made herself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen island, opened her laptop, and started looking at postgraduate programs. He finished his call an hour later, walked into the kitchen, stopped when he saw her, and then, without a word, made himself a cup of coffee and sat at the other end of the kitchen island. They worked in silence for 40 minutes. At some point, Naledi looked up and said, "Do you always work this late?" "It's 4 in the afternoon." "I know. It was an observation, not a criticism." He glanced at her. "Yes, I always work late." "Okay." She went back to her screen. Another 10 minutes passed. Then Tae-Young said, "What program are you looking at?" "Urban development. There's one at the university here that has a focus on community infrastructure in under-resourced areas." He was quiet for a moment. "That's specific. I grew up in a neighborhood where the streets flooded every time it rained because the drainage hadn't been updated since the 80s, she said without looking up. "Well, it tends to make you specific." He didn't respond to that, but she noticed, later, that he looked up the program on his own laptop. She didn't mention it. Progress, she thought. Microscopic, stubborn, 1 cell at a time progress. 3 weeks passed. They orbited each other politely. Naledi enrolled in her program. Ta-Young worked 14-hour days. Mrs. Park cooked meals that they sometimes ate at the same table and sometimes didn't. The silence between them had changed slightly in texture, less like a wall and more like a waiting room. And then Aunt Zodwa called. "The family cookout is next Saturday," Zodwa said. "Your grandmother wants you there, and she wants to meet the husband." "He's not my husband yet." "The fiancé, then. Whatever he is. She wants to see him." Naledi relayed the message to Tae-Young that evening. He was on the couch reading something on his tablet. He looked up. "A family cookout." "Yes. How many people?" "Probably 40. Maybe 50. He looked back at his tablet. "Fine. Tae-Young." "What?" "My family is—" She searched for the word. "A lot. Some of them are warm and some of them are competitive, and some of them say exactly what they think, regardless of whether it's helpful. I just want you to know that going in." He lowered the tablet. "Do I look like someone who gets rattled by family dynamics? You look like someone who's never had to survive a Dlamini cookout." Something crossed his face. Amusement, maybe. He hid it quickly. "I'll be fine." She gave him a look that contained multitudes. Saturday came. The cookout was at Aunt Grace's house, which had a large yard. A sound system that the neighbors had filed noise complaints about at least 3 times, and a braai setup that her Uncle Themba managed with the seriousness of a head of state managing nuclear codes. There were children everywhere, music, the smell of meat and onions and her grandmother's famous potato salad, and there were the cousins. Now, to be absolutely fair to the cousins, they were not bad people. They were simply people who had grown up in a world that rewarded a certain kind of beauty and a certain kind of boldness, and they had leaned into both. Portia was 24, tall, with the kind of smile that arrived slightly before the rest of her face. Lindy was 26 and had opinions about everything, delivered at high volume. And Zanele was 29 and had once, at a Christmas dinner, told Naledi that she carried herself well for her size, which Naledi had filed under compliments she planned to think about more later and then never thought about again because life was too short. They saw Tae-young the moment he and Naledi walked through the gate. It was, to Naledi's quiet resignation, exactly the reaction she'd expected. "Oh," Portia said, drawing the word out like taffy. "That's him?" Lindy said. "Stop staring," Naledi said under her breath. "We're not staring," Zanele said. "We're appreciating." Tae-young, to his credit, greeted Naledi's grandmother first. Her grandmother, Ma Dlamini, was a 73-year-old woman who had survived things that had broken stronger people and emerged from each of them with better posture. She looked at Tae-young for a long moment. He held her gaze. Didn't rush her. Didn't perform. "You have quiet eyes," Ma Dlamini said finally. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't say it was a compliment yet," she said. "Quiet eyes can mean calm, or they can mean hiding." She tilted her head. "Which is yours?" "Probably a bit of both," he said. Ma Dlamini almost smiled. "Honest. Good start." Naledi relaxed exactly 2%. The afternoon progressed. Food was eaten. Children ran in circles. Naledi's Uncle Themba pulled Tae-young into a conversation about cars that lasted 45 minutes and seemed to go well. Naledi circulated, helped carry plates, laughed at her young cousin's antics, and felt, for the first time in a while, like herself. Not the version of herself that existed quietly at the edge of someone else's world, just herself. She was helping clear cups when she heard it. She probably pushed for this. Portia was saying to Lindy, not far enough away. Like, he's not going to choose her on his own. She must have done something. Soo-hyun arranged it, Lindy said, less cruelty and more practical in her assessment. So he's just doing a dead man a favor. That's so sad. Portia's voice had that particular softness that meant she thought she was being understanding. I feel bad for him, honestly. Naledi put the cups down. She breathed in once, out once. She turned around and found Tae-young standing 3 feet behind her. He had heard it. She could tell because his jaw had shifted, just slightly, in the way it did when he was actively choosing not to respond to something. He looked at her. She looked at him. There was a brief, wordless exchange that contained both acknowledgement and a question. She shook her head slightly. "Don't let it go." He held her gaze for one more second. Then he walked toward where Portia and Lindy were standing, and he said pleasantly, "Naledi, your grandmother is looking for you. I told her I'd find you." Portia blinked. Lindy smiled automatically. Tae-young put his hand at the small of Naledi's back, very lightly, more signal than touch, and he steered her away from the conversation with the practiced ease of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. When they were out of earshot, Naledi said quietly, "You didn't have to." "I know," he said. He removed his hand. "Your grandmother actually is looking for you, by the way. That part wasn't a lie." She looked at him sideways. "Thank you." He didn't respond, but he walked with her. That night, back at the apartment, and they debriefed in the kitchen in the way they'd developed, not side by side, but nearby, adjacent, like two people who weren't ready to be in the same space, but had stopped needing to be in opposite ones. "Your family is," he started. "A lot," she said. "I told you." "Your grandmother is extraordinary," Naledi smiled. "She really is. Portia and Lindy, you don't have to. I just want to say," he said, looking at the counter, "that what they said was wrong. Whatever arrangement this is, He gestured between them. You're not someone's pity project. She was quiet for a moment. Do you actually believe that? Or are you just saying it because you're supposed to? He thought about it. She watched him think about it, which she appreciated more than a fast answer. I'm starting to, he said finally. She nodded. And that's actually enough for now. She took her tea and went to her room. He stood in the kitchen for a while longer. And that, if anyone is paying attention, that was the moment the contract stopped being just a contract. Weeks moved. Rhythm developed. Small, unremarkable, important rhythm. Ta Young started leaving her a cup of tea in the mornings before she woke up, which she didn't ask him about because asking him about it might make him stop. She started making him eat actual food at dinner instead of whatever protein thing he grabbed at 10 p.m. on his way between phone calls. Mrs. Park observed all of this with the expression of a woman who had seen many things in her long career and was keeping score. One Thursday night, Naledi was at the kitchen table surrounded by her coursework when Tae Young came home at 11. She took one look at the controlled chaos of her papers and said, "You need a proper workspace. I have one. You're sitting on a takeaway menu." She lifted herself slightly. There was indeed a takeaway menu under her left leg. "That's load-bearing," she said. He made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It was brief and he recovered quickly, but it happened. "I have a study at the end of the hall," he said. "Use it. There's a desk that's done nothing for 2 years." "I'm fine. Naledi." He looked at her with patient exasperation. "Use the desk." She used the desk. It became her space within a week. She added a second plant. Gerald had been joined by a small fern she named Patricia, and her own lamp and a stack of books that were definitely not all textbooks. Tae Young came in once. He looked at the 2 plants and the biography of a South African urban planner she'd left on the chair, and said nothing. But he had a small shelf installed the following weekend without being asked. She stood in front of it when it was done, and pressed her lips together and decided she was absolutely not going to make a big deal out of that. She made mental note of it, though. In the 5th week, the Korean woman appeared. Her name was Jisoo, and Naledi learned this the way she learned most things she didn't particularly want to know, by accident, at the worst possible moment. Tae Young had mentioned he had dinner with a former business associate. Naledi had come home later than expected from a study group to find 2 people standing at the kitchen island with a bottle of wine between them. Jisoo was the kind of woman who occupied a room without trying, elegant posture, expensive simplicity, the kind of beauty that didn't announce itself and therefore didn't need to. She looked at Naledi when she walked in, the way people look at things they've already assessed and categorized. "You must be Naledi," Jisoo said. "I must be," Naledi agreed pleasantly. Tae Young had straightened slightly when she walked in, almost imperceptibly, but she was learning to read his almost imperceptibles. "Naledi, Jisoo and I are old friends," Jisoo said smoothly. Her hand, Naledi noticed, was resting on the kitchen island, approximately 4 inches from Tae Young's. "Lovely," Naledi said. "Don't let me interrupt. I'll be in the study." She went to the study. She sat at her desk. She did not read a single word for 45 minutes. Jisoo left at 10:30. Naledi heard the door. She waited 5 minutes. Then she went to the kitchen to make tea. Tae Young was still there. He was rinsing the wine glasses with the focused attention of a man doing something with his hands, so he doesn't have to do something with his face. "Who is she?" Naledi asked, calmly. "Someone I knew before the engagement." "Knew how?" He put the glass down, turned around. "We were involved for about 8 months. It ended before Soo-hyun, before everything." "Does she know about us?" "Yes." "Does she accept it?" A pause. "She says she does." "And you?" Naledi asked. "Do you still—" "No," he said, flat. "No hesitation on that one. Whatever it was, it's done." Naledi looked at him for a moment. Then she made her tea and went back to the study. So she sat with Patricia the fern and Gerald the succulent and her tea, and thought about the word done, and how different it sounded depending on who said it, and whether their eyes moved when they said it. His eyes hadn't moved. She catalogued that, and tried not to feel the particular warmth it produced. It was around this time that Desmond came into the picture. He was in her urban development program. Tall, with a quiet confidence that came from competence rather than performance. He'd grown up in a township outside Durban and was writing his thesis on reclamation infrastructure in post-displacement communities. He and Naledi had been paired for a group presentation, started meeting for study sessions, and discovered somewhere between municipal water tables and displacement policy that they found it very easy to talk to each other. Not romantically. Not in the beginning. Just humanly. The way you talk when someone listens to what you're actually saying instead of waiting for you to stop so they can talk. "You light up when you talk about this stuff," Desmond told her one afternoon, over coffee near the campus library. "I just think cities should work for everyone," she said. "You said that to the professor, like you were going to fight him if he disagreed." "I was ready to," she said. And he laughed. And she laughed. And it felt uncomplicated in a way that very little else in her life did right now. She mentioned him to Tae-young in passing. Study partner, group project. Tae-young nodded and said nothing notable. But he noticed. Naledi came home one evening talking about something Desmond had said about a case study, and Tae-young, who had been half reading a report, put it down, quietly, and watched her talk. She was using her hands. Her face was animated in a way it wasn't always in this apartment, a way that it had been, actually, at the cookout with her family, a way he was only beginning to recognize as what she looked like when she wasn't carefully managing herself. He didn't say anything, but something moved in his chest, something that felt unpleasantly like displacement. He picked his report back up and read the same paragraph 4 times. Meanwhile, Portia was not finished. In the 6th week, Portia arrived at the apartment uninvited. Invited, it turned out, by Naledi's Aunt Zodwa, who had given her the address, with the stated justification that family should know where family lives. Naledi opened the door to find her cousin standing there in a dress that was technically appropriate for a Sunday afternoon and practically designed as a declaration of war. "Cousin," Portia hugged her with genuine-seeming warmth. "I brought cake." "You hate baking," Naledi said. "I bought cake," Portia corrected, "from that nice Korean bakery." Naledi stepped back and let her in. Tae-young was in the living room. Portia saw him and immediately redistributed her weight in a way that managed to be both casual and calculated. "Tae-young," she said, smiling. "I've heard so much about you." "Portia," he said, politely. Nothing more. Naledi made tea. She watched from the kitchen as Portia settled herself on the couch and began asking Tae-young questions that were technically about business and practically about access. He answered with the measured civility of a man who had dealt with more genuinely dangerous people than this before breakfast and found this only mildly inconvenient. At some point, Portia laughed very loudly at something, and her hand landed on Tae-young's arm and stayed there about 3 seconds longer than social convention required. Naledi set her teacup down on the counter. Tae-young looked at Portia's hand on his arm. Then he stood up, which removed the hand, and said, "Can I get anything from the kitchen?" Naledi was already looking at him when he walked in. "Your cousin," he said quietly, "is very enthusiastic." "You have no idea," Naledi said. "She's going to come back." "Almost certainly." He picked up a glass and filled it with water. "Does it bother you?" The question landed carefully. Naledi considered it. "What bothers me," she said slowly, "is that they do this and then act like they're doing me a favor. Like, oh, we're just making sure he knows he has options. Like I should be grateful they're checking. He was quiet for a moment. You don't have to be grateful for that. I know. She looked at him. Do you... She stopped. What? Nothing? No, lady. She looked at her tea. Do you ever look at her, Portia, Jisoo, any of them, and think, why am I over here when I could be over there? The kitchen was very still. He put his glass down, turned fully to face her. No, he said. She searched his face for the caveat, the pause, the redirect. There wasn't one. No, okay, she said. Her voice came out slightly smaller than she intended. He went back to the living room and told Portia, pleasantly, that he had a call in 10 minutes, and it would probably run long. Portia got the message with slightly less grace than she'd arrived with, said her goodbyes, and left. That night, Naledi heard a knock on her study door. She opened it. Ta Young was standing there, which was unusual. He normally sent texts from across the apartment like they lived in different countries. There's something good on TV, he said, if you want a break. She looked at him. He looked at the doorframe. He was not, she had learned, a man who repeated himself or apologized for vulnerability. So the fact that he was standing there saying this was about as big a gesture as a different person bringing flowers. What is it? She asked. A documentary about cities. She blinked. You looked up my field. It was recommended, he said, very casually to the doorframe. She picked up her tea. Let me get a blanket. They watched the documentary on the couch, not touching, 6 inches apart, but present. Both of them, genuinely, in the same space. At one point, Naledi pointed at the screen and said, "That's exactly what I want to do. Right there. That model. Community-led infrastructure revision that doesn't displace the people it's supposed to serve." He looked at the screen, then at her. "You're going to do it," he said. No caveat, no qualifier, just a simple, level certainty that hit her differently than she expected. "You don't know that," she said. "I know that you argued with your professor for 8 straight minutes, and he changed his slide," he said. She laughed, or actually laughed, the unguarded kind. And for just a moment, the 6 inches between them on the couch felt both enormous and completely unnecessary. Tae Young looked at the television. Something was happening in his expression that she couldn't fully name yet. Something that looked like a man who was beginning to understand that obligation, and something else had started to overlap, and he wasn't entirely sure what to do about it. She pulled her blanket up. He didn't move away. They stayed like that until the documentary ended, and that is where everything stayed. Fragile, cautious, full of almost, until Desmond and Jisoo arrived in the same week and blew the whole careful structure apart. Desmond texted on a Tuesday to say his usual study spot was closed, and did she mind if they worked at a coffee shop near her side of town? She agreed. It was a perfectly ordinary afternoon of thesis notes and terrible campus coffee until Tae Young walked past the window. He was on a call, stopped mid-step when he saw her. She raised her hand in a small wave. He looked at Desmond. Desmond, unaware of any of this, was highlighting something in a journal article with complete academic focus. Tae Young nodded at her, walked on. That evening he was quiet in a way that had edges. She let it sit until dinner. Then she said, "That was Desmond, from my program. We told you about him." "I know who he is." "You looked like you didn't." "I looked like what?" "Like someone trying not to look like something," she said. He set his fork down. "That's not a sentence. You know what I mean." "He likes you," Tae Young said. Flat. Stating a fact the way he stated facts. Directly, without theatrical inflection, which was somehow more charged than if he'd made it a scene. "We're friends," Naledi said. He likes you, Tae-young repeated. She looked at him for a long moment. And? And nothing. I'm noting it. You're noting it, she said, like it's a memo. Naledi, we are not together, Tae-young. Not really. That was the contract. No obligations. No, I know what the contract says. Then why are you noting things? He picked his fork back up, said nothing. But his jaw was doing that thing again. And Naledi looked at her food and felt the most complicated possible combination of things. Frustration and something else. Something warmer that she was not going to name out loud until she absolutely had to. 2 days later, Jisoo called while Naledi was in the apartment. She heard Tae-young's voice from the hallway, low and controlled. She wasn't trying to listen, but apartments have a way of carrying voices when you're not careful. Jisoo, no, I told you. A pause. That's not. Another pause. I said no. And then nothing, which meant the call had ended. He came back to the kitchen. Naledi was looking at her laptop screen with the focused attention of someone who had absolutely not been listening. She wants to meet for coffee, he said. You don't have to explain yourself to me, she said. I'm not explaining myself. I'm telling you. She looked up. Is there a difference? He thought about it. Yes, he said. There is. He sat down. I'm not meeting her. Okay, Naledi said. Not because of the contract, he added. The kitchen was very quiet. Okay, she said again, softer this time. She went back to her screen. He made coffee. But the air between them had changed in a way that couldn't be changed back, which is sometimes how the most important things happen. Not with announcements, but with small declarations that mean everything and cost everything, and neither person is quite ready to receive yet. Naledi Dlamini had come into this arrangement, believing she was the one with nothing to lose. She was beginning to understand. She'd been wrong about that. 3 days after the Jisoo phone call, Tae-young did something that had no contractual basis whatsoever. He came to her university, not to pick her up, not because anything had gone wrong. He appeared at the entrance of the postgraduate building at 4 in the afternoon, carrying 2 cups of coffee, wearing his work clothes, while looking completely out of place among the students with their backpacks and their noise, and he texted her. Outside. Brought coffee. You mentioned you had a long afternoon. She stood in the corridor and read that text 3 times. Then she went outside. He handed her the cup without ceremony. She took it. They stood there for a moment in the late afternoon sun, both of them looking at a reasonable patch of sky rather than at each other. You didn't have to come here, she said. I was nearby. The office is on the other side of the city. I was nearby, he repeated, with the absolute commitment of a man who had decided his story and was staying with it. She took a sip of the coffee. It was exactly right. She'd mentioned once in passing that she didn't like it too sweet. He'd filed it somewhere and retrieved it accurately, and she wasn't going to make a thing of that. She made a thing of it internally. Desmond came out of the building 5 minutes later, stopped when he saw Tae-young, and the 2 men looked at each other with the specific, calibrated politeness of people doing rapid assessment. Desmond, Naledi said. This is Tae-young. Tae-young. Desmond. They shook hands, said the correct words. Desmond glanced at Naledi with an expression that was simultaneously supportive and slightly apologetic, the way a good friend looks at you when they understand a situation better than you want them to. I'll see you Thursday, Desmond said to her. Then to Tae-young. She's the best in the program, just so you know. He walked away before Tae-young could respond. Tae-young looked at Naledi. He does that intentionally, he said. Does what? Says something decent about you, and then leaves before you can react. She blinked. You got all of that from one sentence? It's a good strategy, he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like grudging respect, which she found absolutely hilarious and also somehow made everything worse. They drove home together in a silence that had warmth in it for the first time. That warmth lasted 4 days. Then Zanele called a family dinner. Not a cookout, a dinner, at a restaurant. For Naledi's mother's birthday, which Naledi had genuinely forgotten because her mother had a habit of announcing her birthday the way weather systems announced themselves. Suddenly, and with the expectation that you were already prepared. The restaurant was nice, round tables, soft lighting. About 15 family members arranged around 2 pushed-together tables, which meant there was nowhere to hide and no sightlines to avoid. Tae-young came. He sat beside Naledi. He ate. He answered questions from uncles with the patience of a man who had negotiated things far more complex than uncle questions. He complimented the food. He laughed, just briefly, at something Naledi's young cousin Thabo said. Thabo was 8, and had decided that Ta-young was, and this is a direct quote, the most serious person I've ever seen, and wanted to know if he was ever not serious. Sometimes, Tae-young said, when no one's watching. Thabo stared at him. That's suspicious. Yes, Tae-young agreed. It is. Thabo nodded with great solemnity and went back to his food, apparently satisfied with this answer. And Naledi was biting the inside of her cheek to keep her face straight. And then Zanele, across the table, said with the tone of someone sharing a helpful observation. Naledi, Desmond texted you earlier. I saw the notification when you left your phone on the table. The table had a small pause. Tae-young's water glass paused its journey to his mouth. Thank you, Zanele, Naledi said pleasantly. I'll look at it later. Is Desmond the one from your program? Her mother asked, with a mother's complete unawareness of what she was walking into. You mentioned him a few weeks ago. Study partner, Naledi said. He's very attentive, Zanele said. For a study partner. Zanele, Naledi said. I'm just saying. You really don't have to. But Zanele had the expression of a woman committed to her course. I just think it's nice that Naledi has someone she can, connect with. On her level. The words landed with the precision of something that had been aimed. On her level. Naledi held very still. Her mother looked confused. One of the aunts looked uncomfortable, and Tae-young set his water glass down. What level would that be? He asked. Quiet. Measured. The kind of quiet that has teeth you only see when it opens. Zanele blinked. She hadn't expected direct engagement. Just, common experiences, shared background. It can be hard when people are from different backgrounds, he said. I didn't mean anything by it. I know, he said. And then, with the absolute conversational precision of a surgeon, he said, Naledi is the most capable person in her postgraduate program. Her professor referenced her research in a faculty meeting last week. She is building a career that will outlast every conversation at this table. I think the question of who is on whose level has already been answered. Complete silence. Naledi was looking at her plate with the expression of someone experiencing several conflicting emotions simultaneously and not sure which one should win. Thabo, from the end of the table, said cheerfully, What's a faculty meeting? And the table breathed again. Naledi didn't look at Tae-young for the rest of dinner, not because she was upset, but because if she looked at him right now, she was going to do something embarrassing with her face, and she had enough self-respect to prevent that. On the way home, she said, You didn't have to say that. I know. People are going to talk. They were already talking. She looked out the window. The city moved past, lit up and humming. How did you know about the faculty meeting? Mrs. Park overheard you on the phone to your professor and told me. Mrs. Park is a spy. Mrs. Park is efficient, he said. There's a difference. She pressed her lips together. Outside, a traffic light turned green. Tae-young. What? Thank you, she said. Simple. No additions. He changed lanes. Don't thank me. It was accurate. She smiled at the window so he couldn't see it. He saw it in the rearview mirror. He looked back at the road quickly, but his hands on the wheel had relaxed in a way they hadn't been for most of the evening. 2 days later, Jisoo appeared at the apartment building. Not inside. Tae-young had not given her the access code, and Naledi noted this detail privately and stored it. But she was in the lobby when Naledi came back from university, and she was dressed for impact in the way that meant this hadn't been accidental. Naledi, Jisoo said. Warm. Careful. I was hoping we could talk. Naledi shifted her bag on her shoulder. She was tired. She had a presentation in 4 days, and a chapter revision due Thursday, and approximately no patients available for whatever this was. Sure, she said. They sat in the lobby seating area. Jisoo folded her hands. She had the posture of a woman who had rehearsed this. I want to be honest with you, Jisoo said, because I think you deserve honesty. That's a sentence people usually say before they say something they think will hurt, Naledi said. Jisoo paused. Not Tae-young and I have history. Long history. I know how he thinks. I know what he does when he's uncomfortable, and what he does when he's interested, and the difference between them. She looked at Naledi directly. He's doing the contract because of Soo-hyun. That's real. But whatever he feels now, it's still about obligation. He's a man who honors his word at the expense of his own happiness. I know that. I've seen it. Naledi was quiet. I'm not your enemy, Jisoo said. I didn't say you were. She stopped. I don't want either of you trapped. That's considerate, Naledi said. Though I notice this particular consideration is pointing in a specific direction. Jisoo looked at her. Really looked. And something in her expression shifted. The prepared version of this conversation bumping up against the actual person in front of her. You're not what I expected, Jisoo said. I'm not what anyone expects, Naledi said. I've had enough time to stop finding that upsetting. She stood up. For what it's worth, I'm not trapped. Whatever I'm doing it with my eyes open. She picked up her bag. Thank you for the honesty. She went upstairs. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. The thing was, Jisoo wasn't entirely wrong. That was the problem with people who knew someone well. They had data. Real data. And Naledi had spent enough years being the last option to understand the way obligation and affection could look identical from the outside, while being completely different from the inside. She heard Tae-young come home an hour later, heard him move through the apartment, kitchen, study, back to the living room. Then, after a moment, a knock on her door. Jisoo was here, she said before he could speak. He stopped. I know. The desk security told me. She was thorough, said what she came to say. He came into the room and sat in the chair near her desk, the one that had become, over weeks of small domestic normalcy, slightly his chair in her space. What did she say? Naledi looked at him. She said you honor obligation over happiness, that what you're doing here, this, she gestured between them in the same way he had, months ago, is Soo-hyun, not you. He was quiet. Is she right? Naledi asked. She was right, he said. Past tense. How far past? He thought about it for a moment. Then he said, the night at the restaurant, the bathroom. She waited. I went after you because I didn't want something to happen, he said. But when I got there and I saw you, it stopped being about obligation in about 4 seconds. Something else happened. I didn't know what to do with it, so I filed it somewhere and tried to behave normally, which, for the record, is not something I'm practiced at. Naledi looked at her hands. Tae-young. I'm not telling you this to pressure you, he said, with the careful deliberateness of a man who had clearly thought about how to say this. "I'm telling you, because Jisoo had data on an old version of me, and I don't want you making decisions based on old data." She looked up at him. The study was quiet. Gerald and Patricia were on the shelf, small and steady and alive. "I don't know what this is," she said honestly. "What we are?" "Neither do I," he said. "But I know it's not nothing." She pressed her lips together. "That's not nothing, isn't exactly a declaration." "No," he agreed. "It's a start." They sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "Desmond is presenting his thesis proposal tomorrow. He's nervous. I told him I'd read his conclusion tonight." "Okay," Tae-young said. "I'm telling you because," she paused, "because I think you should know that Desmond is my friend, and that's real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But that's also all it is, and you should know that too." He nodded. Once, the muscle in his jaw moved in the way it did when he was receiving something he wasn't sure how to carry yet. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me." She nodded. He got up, paused at the door. "So there's food when you're ready. Mrs. Park made that thing with the rice that you said was good." "The dole sot." "That one." She almost smiled. "I'll be out in a bit." He left. She sat for another moment. Then she opened Desmond's document and started reading. And so things shifted. Not dramatically. Not with a speech or a moment designed for memory. But the honesty between them had changed something structural in the apartment's atmosphere. The way a single window opened changes the temperature of an entire room. Tae-young stopped working until midnight, started being present at dinner in a way that meant actually present, rather than physically in the room. He asked her questions about her coursework and listened to the answers instead of waiting for them to finish. She stopped bracing every time he walked into a room, and I stopped performing the particular kind of smallness she'd learned to default to in spaces that hadn't fully chosen her. Mrs. Park, for her part, started making 2 cups of tea in the mornings without being asked. Naledi had had a good day. Presentation submitted. Positive response from her supervisor. She came home with the specific lightness of academic success and found Tae-young in the living room, jacket off, looking at something on his laptop that had clearly been bothering him for a while. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing that needs to—" "Tae-young, what's wrong?" He looked at her, then he turned the laptop around. "Deal collapsed. 18 months of work. The partner pulled out this afternoon." She came and sat on the couch, not 6 inches away this time. Close. She looked at the screen, on numbers and clauses and the polite language of professional devastation. "That's a significant loss," she said. "Yes. What happens now?" He leaned back, rubbed his face with one hand, in the way he never did in professional settings, but sometimes did, she'd noticed, when he thought no one was paying attention. "We rebuild. Find another route. It's not—" He stopped. "It's fine. I've been here before." "You can be upset," she said. He looked at her sideways. "I'm serious," she said. "You can be upset. You don't have to present the managed version of it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm tired. I know. Not just about this. I'm just—" He stopped again. The sentence was going somewhere he hadn't planned, and she could see him deciding whether to let it finish. She waited. "I've been careful my whole life," he said finally. "About everything. Every relationship, every decision. And I'm good at it. But careful is—" He looked at his hands. "It's a very exhausting way to live." She looked at him. Tanyashi Yangfu, who had walked into a restaurant bathroom for a woman he barely knew and taken pills from her hand without drama, who had stood at a family dinner and defended her so precisely that the whole table went silent, who had come to her university with coffee and a terrible excuse, and stood in the sun looking at the sky because he didn't know what to do with what he was feeling. "You don't have to be careful with me," she said. He looked at her. "I mean it," she said. "Whatever." She found the words carefully. "Whatever this is becoming, you don't have to manage it. I'm not going to break, and I'm not going to run." Something moved in his face. The carefully maintained surface of it shifted, just briefly, just enough, like a door opening 1 inch and light coming through. "Naledi," he said. I think I'm—" He stopped. "You think you're what?" He looked at her. Long, direct, the way he looked at things he was deciding. "I think I'm in a lot of trouble." She understood exactly what he meant. "Join the club," she said. "We have terrible membership benefits and no exit strategy." He made the sound again, the brief, unguarded sound that was becoming her private favorite thing, and she felt it all the way through. She leaned her head back against the couch. He didn't move away. For the first time since they'd shared a couch, neither of them created careful space between themselves. They sat with their shoulders nearly touching, the city lights outside doing what city lights do, and Naledi thought, this is the thing Soo-hyun wanted. Not the contract, not the arrangement. This exact, warm, ordinary, terrifying thing. She hoped, wherever he was, that he was satisfied. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yes." I was going to say no, to the whole thing. The arrangement, the contract, all of it. I had it decided. She paused. And then I thought about how Soo-hyun used to look at me at family things, like I was someone worth looking at. And I thought, what if I let someone try, just once? What if I stopped deciding it would fail before it started? Tae-young was very still beside her. "So if this," she said, "if this becomes something, that's why. Not desperation. Not no options. Because I decided to try. I want that to be clear." "It's clear," he said quietly. "Good." Neither of them moved for a long time. The city hummed. Gerald and Patricia were in the study. Mrs. Park had long gone home. And somewhere between the collapsed business deal and the honest conversation and the shoulder-to-shoulder stillness, two very careful people made the quiet, terrifying, mutual decision to stop being careful. Which meant, of course, that everything was about to get significantly harder before it got better. That's how real things work. This is your community. People who understand that real love isn't a feeling that arrives clean and easy. It arrives at 7:45 in the morning with a contract and bad timing and a dead man's wish. And it builds itself out of tea made right and a shelf installed without being asked and one honest sentence at a time. If this story is making you feel something real, you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe. Not because we asked, but because you know this is a space worth staying in. And leave something in the comments, not just a reaction. Tell us something real. Have you ever had someone walk into a space for you when they had every reason not to? Have you ever been the person no one expected to choose? This community hears you. We're listening.